Men. What's something women don't realize is harassment? Story 1. Some women once tried to take off some of my clothes in a club without me showing interest in any of them at all. When I told them to F off after a while, they got angry at me. Never been so confused. They talked to one of the guards at the club right after. Don't know what they said, but as they talked to him, they pointed at me. Maybe they said I was the bad guy or something. When I saw that, I just left. I figured the guard would just trust the two girls more than me. Club was boring anyways. Imagine some guys in the club trying to take off a random woman's clothes. The double standard is disgusting. Story 2. I had a drunk young lady rip my bottom-up shirt off in a bar on a dance floor, then proceed to cup my D in balls. I was pissed, so I told her and her friends to F off after I got my shirt back from them, which had all the buttons torn off except the bottom two. That was super annoying, but I was going to just deal with it, until I was asked to leave by the bouncers for yelling at women and not buttoning up my shirt. Another group of women approached me and said they had the whole thing on video, which I then sent to the bar's management and got a $200 gift certificate for it. In hindsight, I probably should have just taken it to the police. I never felt an anger or scared for my safety, but it was totally inappropriate, and if I did that, I would be in jail. Story 3. I was working at a birthday party in a bar once, and a really drunk 40-year-old woman decided to just walk behind the counter and slip a banknote into my shirt. She then started to rub around my chest like some sort of massage, I guess? It was really weird. I just stood there confused, waiting for it to end. Her husband was watching the whole time and didn't seem to be happy about the whole thing, but nobody really seemed to care or just laughed about it. If I, as a 40-year-old man, had done that to a 17-year-old girl working at a bar, I would have gotten one hell of a lawsuit. Story 4. Every wedding and funeral I've ever been to as a Scotsman, there are a gaggle of horny grannies who at every opportunity try to get a look under the kilt. For those of you who are kilted and experience the same, have you also had the ones who approach saying, "If I can manage to get a $5 in the sporan, I am legally allowed to look," with a maniacal grin? Or was that just because I was down in Sussex at the time? Story 5. I've been into weightlifting most of my adult life. As a result, my arms and chest are noticeable. I'm not like a bodybuilder or anything, but I've got big arms and a protruding chest. Women think that they could just grab on my arms and rub my chest without permission or warning. I think that they think it's okay because they compliment me afterwards. It makes me uncomfortable. My fiance never really took me seriously until at a work party, one of my female co-workers basically groped my arms in front of her and it made her jealous. She gets it now. Story 6. An old co-worker of mine, he was male, was sexually harassed by one of our directors. He told me and was like, "Well, it's whatever. She's hot, but I wish she'd stop asking for sex, touching my hair, grabbing my butt." A few years down the line, my friend and I are both department directors in other facilities. Yay us! The industry we were in was quite niche, and basically word gets around. Everybody knows everybody in the area. I sit down for a meeting with one of the hiring directors and she said, "We were thinking of hiring a harassing director for the open position, and I know you worked with her. What do you think?" I was honest and said she was great at her job, very highly qualified. Families loved her, staff loved her for the most part, but she sexually harassed my coworker over the course of 2 years, and she didn't get hired. I was really glad I told the truth in that situation. Very nerve-wracking, but that was the actual reason she didn't get hired. She was in the final running and effed herself. I hope trends continue. There should be no double standard when it comes to these things. Story 7. My partner was at a truck stop waiting for his food when some lady came up and grabbed his junk. Just walked up and shoved her hand down his pants. He pushed her off, said he was taken, and told her to F off. She reached for him again and said, "Well, she isn't here now, is she?" It disgusts me that people are like this, regardless of gender. It's even worse that women aren't held as accountable as men are. Story 8. My partner went to a job interview and the older woman kept touching him as they talked, like on his arm or hand. I told him that's not okay, and he doesn't have to take that. He said that he doesn't want to make a scene because she might accuse him of harassment in retaliation and she had his information. And I realized men put up with harassment out of fear too. Different reasons, but it sucks for both genders. Story 9. The all-women management team purposely gave the male staff uniforms that were a size too small so they could ogle asses. The button on my pants snapped off after my third shift because my pants were so tight, and they wouldn't give me a replacement for 3 months. I was 16. Story 10. Touching me or flirting after I've said no or words to that effect. When I was younger, I was with a group of people, wearing jeans with a hole in the seat. Some chick took that as an invitation to jam a couple of fingers up my A. Women in the group thought it was funny, except for one. Also, servers, brushing your breasts on my arm or shoulder makes me really uncomfortable and doesn't lead to increased tips. Story 11. Had a weird interaction at my last job. I was the only male manager in the company, and one of the youngest, and during a weekly call with the other 18 managers, one of the women noticed I'd shaved, since I had my camera on, and pointed it out, to which I suddenly had a gaggle of women talking about how young and handsome it made me look. I legit had a 55-year-old woman tell me exactly I was the type of guy she would have been all over when she was my age. But maybe she can settle for me meeting her daughter. I'm married, they all know this. Then I had another woman tell me she would have to update her drawing now, and proceeded to hold up a pencil drawing of my head with a heart around it. Needless to say, I never turned my camera on again, but still got the odd, must be shy, or we embarrassed him, followed by laughter. Story 12. Work security at a wedding reception. Drunk women feeling empowered and completely secure about their untouchability when abusing staff. Not all women are so vile, but security deals with every one of them who decides to violate someone. We get to deal with complaints from the catering and service staff, and we get harassed ourselves. I've been groped, pawed, and propositioned both covertly and overtly. My favorite was this drunk 40-something lady who could barely stand up, trying to get to the entrance while being supported by the guy she was with. No idea what their actual relationship was. She openly ogled me, then suggested I follow them back to the hotel across the street for a threesome. The guy supporting her, also drunk but not nearly as bad, was apologizing and looking worried the whole time. Not sure what he was actually worried about, the sex proposition, the idea of the idea of a with another guy, the blatant and overt harassment of venue staff, the fact that it was security being harassed, or that his companion seemed intent on face planting on every other step because she was still wearing 4-inch heels. I felt for him, if only because he was probably about to get puked on as soon as they got into their Uber. It was part of the job, and I don't miss working weddings. Story 13. Background. I'm 6'3", in pretty good shape my whole life, and I like to think that I'm relatively attractive. Not to brag or sound conceited or anything, but it factors into the stories. Worked as a bouncer for a beach bar. Roped more times than I could count. One patron was literally known by all the staff for helping the younger male bouncers and faced zero consequences. The cops we had that did parking lot security laughed it off whenever she did it. Also in college, I woke up from a drunken stupor to find a girl who lived on my floor who I knew liked me had broken into my dorm room, took my pants off, and was in the process of insertion without condom. I told her no, and she said boys couldn't say no and threatened me. I was drunk and scared, so I reluctantly let her do her thing, and stayed still. All my friends told me I should have enjoyed it, and all the girls said I was either gay or would have made her feel bad by refusing, and I shouldn't make girls bad about their bodies. Most people said, "You're so much bigger than her, how could she force you to do anything?" Lots of my guy friends said stuff to the effect of, "You're lucky you're attractive, and girls want you, man," and made it seem like I was the rude one for complaining. She also gave me chlamydia for that day, which was super fun. Later that day, my girlfriend, unrelated to the first girl, came home late and wanted to hook up. I was asleep and had a rough day with a lot of emotional stressors with school, work, and my parents fighting and getting divorced. I told her no, and I wasn't in the mood, and she told me boys couldn't refuse sex from their girlfriends. I said no again, and she looked me dead in the eye, became completely serious, and said, "You are effing me tonight, you don't have a choice," and then threatened to tell people I essayed her if I didn't. I was about a foot taller than her, so nobody would have ever believed me that I was forced into anything, but I was in the process of applying to medical school, and an accusation would literally ruin my life. I saw another girl handcuff my friend, who was very drunk, to a radiator in a secluded room at a party, and then gave him oral sex. She brought real handcuffs without a quick release mechanism, so he literally couldn't escape if he wanted to. Afterwards, he told me he didn't want it, but really couldn't do anything about it. He thought they were fake cuffs when she put them on. It was a Halloween party. Her friends made jokes about it for weeks about how we should be careful around this girl or she might get one of us too. People wonder why sometimes I jump when girls I don't know touch me now. Thankfully, the story has a happy ending. I got into med school. I'm completing a residency in my hometown, and I found an awesome wife, and we are very in tune with each other, and I love her dearly. Still wish I knew back in college that those things weren't okay, and I shouldn't accept them as normal. Story 14. A lot of women are either oblivious or brazen in their harassment. One coworker invited me to fly to Las Vegas to attend a wedding with her. When I said my wife would likely have a problem with that, she said we could just tell her it was for work. Then came the kicker. She said, "I'm on birth control, so whoever comes with me can come in me all they want." She was actually pretty pissed that I laughed in her face. A second coworker had lost a lot of weight from her second child. She was feeling good about herself, and I congratulated her, probably saying something like, "Yeah, you look great." She took this as a cue and, for the rest of the day, brought up how she needed a victory lap, namely cheating on her husband with me in a hotel room. Again, she was absolutely livid at being turned down. Women think they could do whatever they want when they are alone with a guy. It's part funny, part sad. Just sitting on your lap without asking. Although this is just a symptom of a bigger problem at least. I am regularly faced with the assumption that men are always horny and always want sex. Sadly, an assumption people of all genders seem to make. For people thinking this way, invading your personal space, touching, making comments, etc. is not harassment, as they just assume you want that to happen. Now, if you make your boundaries clear and say no to them, you somehow are the bad guy again. Now, of course, this problem is not limited to women, but to me seems to be a general problem in interpersonal relationships. Story 16. I'm a woman and this subreddit is eye-opening. Honestly, never realized men went through this much harassment, especially in work settings. This needs to be talked about more often. These women 100% believe their behavior is acceptable, but if the shoe was on the other foot, they'd be calling HR immediately. I guess a lot of women don't realize this happens because this behavior is not in their wheelhouse. Do corporations even have mandatory sexual harassment training anymore? I've seen hundreds of videos over the years, and nearly all focused on men harassing women. Story 17. Another one I just thought of that's more general, talking about someone's sexual performance, health, etc. to others without their consent when you're their partner or have slept with them or whatever is not okay, man or woman. If I found out my wife had been talking to her friends about specifics of her life and how I am in bed, I probably would not be comfortable ever seeing or talking to those people again. Story 18. Calling me gay if I'm not interested in them. Saying I can't handle a woman like them. I don't want to handle that particular woman, and it has nothing to do with attractiveness. It's just that kind of attitude or energy that repels me, as if I'm getting some kind of magical gift that cannot be denied. Attitude and energy are huge factors in attractiveness to me, and it blows my mind that there are plenty of women that don't understand that. You may have the body of a 10 out of 10, but if you have the personality of a 1 out of 10, you are still a 1 in my book. Story 19. Between middle and high school, we used to do competitive swimming in Reno, Nevada. Men had the option between the regular baggy swimsuit or the tight Speedo suit. A noticeable amount of female coaches demanded their team wear the Speedos for every competition and practice meeting. Catcalls from the moms in the stands during the competitions had the announcers hush them repeatedly. I'm imagining the hushing to be something like, "Reminder for the wine moms in Section B that the athletes here today are minors. 14 will get you 20. Thank you." Story 20. A lot of women seem to not have a problem going through the pictures on my phone when I let them borrow it for things like adding to DoorDash orders or putting their numbers on my phone. It's really weird how many of y'all do this. Story 21. Women are always just rubbing my arms and squeezing my muscles and commenting on what a big strong man I am. How their husbands aren't strong and handy. Telling me how lucky my wife is. I just brush it off, but if it was the other way around, I'd be in jail. Story 22. This actually just happened to a buddy of mine a few days ago. So my buddy, we'll call him Jack, this girl, we'll call her Samantha, and I were going to visit our friend that lives 5 hours away. So we were all hanging out and having a good time going to some bars, and just hanging out about halfway through the weekend, though it was clear that Samantha was really trying to get in Jack's pants. To the point he would say no, and she would just keep trying. And on the last night, she went as far as waking him up from his sleep twice to try to have sex with him after he said no. He was kind of pissed off because if the roles were switched, he would be in a lot of trouble. I think some girls just don't get that no means no. She was just being too forward for the other person to not be putting anything back in. Story 23. Shouldn't only need to be men chiming in on this one, and it's a very simple answer. If a woman engages in literally any actions or words that would land a man in HR for harassment, then it's pretty obvious she's engaging in it too. It's actually really poor just how many women pull the sexual harassment card, which has such far-reaching implications for the career of whom she accused, yet they freely engage in it themselves. For the record, I'm a woman, and I think it's pathetic. Story 24. Hitting guys. Gender flip it. If a man hits a woman, the police would be called and the guy would have to deal with a lot of angry people trying to take him down. But a woman hitting a man? All too often, it's portrayed as if the man deserves it. I've had it in the workplace. It's not funny, as some people think. And I've actually had a union rep tell me to start documenting the times it happened. Story 25. I had my kilt lifted up at a friend's wedding by one of the groom's aunties when I was about 21. It was December in a busy park, an outdoors wedding. kids in attendance, and she effing lifted the kilt. I left right there and then. My brother-in-law was also fondled by a group of girls on a hen night when we worked as knights on a club door in suits of armor. It was billed as Maiden's Night in the club, and we were hired to stand at the door in our suits of armor just behind the door crew at the second set of doors because we happened to own our own suits of armor. I was lucky as my armor had a crotch guard, but his didn't.